Hello and welcome to Something's Off with Andrew Heaton. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and I think you have excellent posture. Right now, you look like a ballerina listening to my podcast, or maybe a Viking warlord. Either way, I am very intimidated and impressed. Today, we're going to do another installment of Friday Release Valve, which means I'm going to bring on a comedian friend of mine to batter around funny headlines. And unlike the rest of the week, we're making no effort at all to be thoughtful or substantive. It's just mental glucose for your drive home. But before I bring on Jimmy Failla, I do need to read a word from our sponsors. This week, the program is brought to you by Flip Flops Resort on St. Murray Island. Have you ever heard of medical tourism? Healthcare in the United States is so expensive and so complicated. So a lot of people fly to Thailand or Mexico for a vacation where they can also get plastic surgery, or maybe a treatment not yet approved by the FDA. I myself have been to Iceland a couple of times to get work done on my Tompkins gland. Well, if you need a kidney, you can get them cheap on St. Murray Island. In fact, you can get pretty much any organ you need. You need a lung, they got lungs. In the market for a pancreas, they got them. You can even get a heart. Well below the black market levels you'd pay for here in the United States at the loading dock behind Whole Foods. That's because St. Murray Island prides itself on spare parts harvested from hybrid animals. I'm not sure what a hybrid animal is or why there's so many armed guards around the compound where they grow and educate them, but it's filling a niche market, and I think we can all appreciate that. And if God didn't want scientists making talking baboons or bipedal alligators who can operate grappling hooks, maybe God should be a little less lazy and stop those scientists. You should probably do it soon, too, because they have been importing a disturbing amount of wolverines and jetpacks of late. Also, I'd like to address a couple of concerns people have been emailing me about our show sponsor this week. Listen, I get why you might initially feel uncomfortable about supporting a fascist government. But I've met St. Murray Island's Supreme Overlord, Colonel Harkonnen Deathfist, and I think he brings up a pretty good point. We've never tried real fascism before. Maybe this time we'll get it right. Who knows? And let's hope so, because they have a lot of condors over there who know how to tie nooses. St. Murray Island Flip Flops Resort. Don't listen to the TripAdvisor. It's actually quite pleasant. My guest today is Jimmy Failla. He is a very, very funny man coming to us from New York. Jimmy, thank you for coming back on the program.
Good to be here, man. Just picked up a new organ myself, so I'm feeling good.
Congratulations. I'm very glad to hear that. Did you ever get your car back?
I got my car back.
Really?
Which is a crazy, what a banana story, man. My car got stolen, and I got it back like a month and a half later. But just stick with me.
Okay.
I then immediately put it up for sale, sold it to a gentleman from Afghanistan who insisted on not taking the title for the vehicle or the registration. He just wanted the car and paid cash. Okay. Clearly not a man up to any type of nefarious deed or anything like that.
It wouldn't get you in trouble either.
You know it is. Yeah, he's like, like all reasonable buyers, he just wanted me to shave off the VIN and forget that I had ever seen his face.
Yeah.
Seemed like a pretty upstanding gentleman. So, yeah, my car is somewhere right now
being
used as a weapon.
Make pretty good money at least?
Okay. Assuming what he handed me was real, yes. I think I did okay. But again, when your car gets stolen, any money you wind up getting for it is just like cash out of the night sky, because it was a legitimate month and a half later. So you were out of me, man.
You were a cab driver for a while. Didn't some guy try and pay you in like Iraqi dollars one time?
I had a guy who told me he was a military counterfeiter, who I drove to LaGuardia Airport, who told me he had Saddam Hussein in his bag. And he just had such a strange look on his face. I wasn't sure that he meant the body or the currency or whatever it was. But he did ultimately get there and try to pay me with, yes, Saddam Hussein. I wish I knew the name of the currency. You know how, like drachma or something? That's like the kind of fun fact you would know.
That sounds like the kind of thing I would know. I don't know what Saddam dollars were. I guess you probably made the good call at the time, because if this was like at the height of the Iraqi war, I don't recall quite when you were a cab driver, but that could have been illegal. I don't know. However, probably now a pretty good investment strategy. Like there are these Zimbabwe dollars. They've given up at this point in their history. Zimbabwe doesn't even print its own currency anymore. I think they just use ours. But for a while, they had this massive inflation to where you can – I own several, they're like, I think $100 billion bills from Zimbabwe. And I bought them so that when I did funny projects, I could, I'd pay my cameraman and stuff, but I'd give him one of these too to be like, hey, like, I wish I could pay you more. And they have become collector's items, and they are percentage-wise the best investment I've ever made in my life was buying these hyperinflated dollars.
Andrew Heaton. Who knew you were such a savvy financial genius?
That's right.
I always look for you on Squawk Box and making money.
That's any day now.
Currency.
Well, I'm gonna kick some headlines to you. We can batter around for a bit. In Argentina, a football fan brings grandfather's skull to title celebrations so he won't miss the occasion. So this, I assume this means soccer, but they're saying football. And the guy brought the remains of his grandfather's skull with him to the victory parade when the local sports team won against the other sports team, and he wanted his grandfather to be a part of it.
Which is weird. Yeah, that's, first of all, not easy to do because you're not allowed to use your hands in soccer. So I don't know how he got them there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A lot of foot juggling.
Yeah. Well, maybe he's into hacky sacks. Maybe he's really good at hacky sacks.
Yeah, Grandpa was a little beat up by the time he got there, I would imagine. But,
I can't imagine a worse fate than having my head incorporated into sports long term. I'm not a sports guy. I like soccer marginally more than I like football, but like American football would be the worst because it's like 15 hours of allegedly gameplay, but it's only like 6 minutes of real gameplay. I would much rather have my skull just lifted into the sky with a balloon and let it rest wherever than have it incorporated into sports.
Yeah, I don't know. As skull placement goes, I definitely feel like there were better venues. But I appreciate the bond because this is the one thing that you don't grasp as like an avid sports fan. Yeah. Is that the sports bond between certain men is a very sacred thing because it's their only means of communication. Okay. Meaning, like, I grew up in a house with very stifled, intellectual correspondence between like me and my dad. But we would actually channel all of our emotions towards each other through the Yankees. Mm-hmm. If it was like, I got grounded or something went wrong, I'd say like, oh, the Yankees suck, and that was my way of just taking it out on him because I couldn't say anything directly to him. And I can famously recall the night I happened to be on the receiving end of a very favorable gesture from a young woman. I remember coming home and telling my dad how great the Yankees were and that they were going to win the World Series with no anecdotal evidence to back that up. In fact, they finished in 4th place that year. But I finised first. Hey-o, holy heck, I wasn't even thinking that, but I walked right into it.
No, that's great.
I apologize.
I can't speak sports with my dad. We used to talk produce a little bit, like when I was in college at one point. I came home and Dad asked me a couple of times whether I was spending the night or not. And I go, no, I'm going back later tonight. And then he'd go, a few minutes later, you going to spend the night? No, I'm not going to spend the night tonight. And I was going to leave and he stopped me and he's like, hey, hold on a second. I got you tomatoes. And I was like, thanks, Dad. I got you tomatoes too. Heartwarming. All right, so I'll kick it over to, I think we're still in our hemisphere. And in the Dominican Republic, a singer performs for 106 hours to try and get a Guinness World Record and failed. The previous attempt had been 105 hours, but apparently he took like 2-minute breaks between all of the songs that he was singing, and so he only managed to get in something like 5,000 songs. Or no, maybe the other way. The first guy had 5,000. I like this because I think if you look at the history of music, it used to be that it was sort of like based on talent and mob ties, and that was how you got really far in the music industry. Yeah. And then it kind of shifted over to just sheer sex appeal. I think we should move to just pure stamina, where it just we rate singers based entirely on endurance. How long can they do it? That's all I want to know.
It's like one of those touch the car competitions where you gotta,
exactly,
get the finger on the car.
Yeah.
Whoever still touching wins. Some of these records are so stupid to me. I don't understand the motivation for them. Like, the longest, it was one I was reading the other day, and it was the longest Dungeons and Dragons. It was the longest Dungeons and Dragons marathon session amongst 2 people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but it's one of those records where even if you're the winner, you're still a loser. It's like, I don't know. I just don't know that we're identifying and pursuing the right goals in this day and age. But I admire the persistence. I mean, 106 hours of anything is, my goodness.
How many days without sleep is that? That's like at least 4 days. I'm not great at math. That's 4 or 5 days of sleep, right? That you've just almost a week straight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a legit 4 days. So the bad news is they didn't win the record for longest consecutive song, but they probably did win some type of record for cocaine or Adderall. So
right. So there's at least like a conciliatory prize. Yeah, I like that. I dig that.
Something kept them up that long.
Yeah. All right. Kicking it to Ukraine. A comedian who plays Ukraine's president on TV leads the real race. His name is Volodymyr Zelensky.
Hey, my only question is the United States government suing them for plagiarism? This is not an original idea.
Well, technically ours is a game show host, right? Like we sort of imported sort of a washed up Pat Ajax type character as opposed to we've never elected Bob Newhart president, although I would give serious consideration to doing so even now.
He'd do a great job at a great State of the Union. A lot of act outs. Maybe a couple of props. But I'm going to push back on that notion that we picked a washed up host.
Yeah. Because
for whatever the quality of the entertainment is, I won't speak to that, but he's definitely in his prime when it comes to delivering it. You know, I'm not going to call it good entertainment, but it's entertainment. He might win the 106-hour challenge. You just needed him retweeting Joe Biden memes and stuff like that. Did you?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, did you see that retweet yesterday?
No, what was that?
Retweeted the Joe Biden meme. So someone made a meme that had been making the rounds of Joe Biden apologizing for, the allegations against him regarding women. Right. And someone photoshopped a meme where another Biden, appears in the picture and begins fondling the real Biden who's speaking. Mm-hmm. So it's basically like they took video footage from a Joe Biden public appearance and spliced it into his apology video and made it look like he was fondling himself there. It was actually legitimately funny.
Yeah.
What a president is doing tweeting it is probably an entirely different debate. But everyone said we were going to get a show, and we did get a show. I will stand by that.
It has not been a boring presidency. That is it. Like, I feel like the Bob Newhart presidency would be amusingly awkward but very dry. The State of the Union address would involve a lot of like corrections and kind of mumbling and then awkwardly backtracking. Yeah, that's all true.
Yeah.
I think if I were Joe Biden's campaign manager, I think what I would do is I would always have oven mitts with me, and then if he looked like he was about to plunge into a crowd, duct tape the oven mitts to his hands, and then be like, okay, go for it now.
Hey, listen, man, if he does win, again, it's the first presidential library to have scratch and sniff books, which is going to be nice.
Shag carpeting everywhere so you can just constantly roll around.
I do laugh, not to get too heavily political, but, being in New York City, it's a pretty heavily Democratic place.
I've heard that.
And they have, like, talking about guys like Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, who are in like their late hundreds, and it's like when they keep saying like the Democrat Party needs to get new blood, I think they actually mean new blood, like transfusion. Like, I think what they're trying to say is like, yeah, do we have any type O? But it's been a heck of a show. That's all I will say without getting too far off the beaten path. I feel like we have more pressing stories to get to.
Yes. So, and we're on the note of the Ukrainian thing. And I'll say real quick, I don't know anything about Volodymyr Zelensky, but I 100% support him just because he's a comedian. So absent other knowledge, I'm just going to default on the comedian. I hope he wins, and good luck to him.
Yeah, absolutely. With him all the way. I'm with him.
Yeah, I'm with him. Over in Russia, they have bears predicting the Ukrainian election. This is in Krasnoyarsk, Russia, where basically what they do, they get a couple of bears and they take photos of the various Ukrainian candidates and they put them on squash, I think, and then they release the bears, and whichever squash the bears go to, that is the official zoo prediction for who's going to win the Ukrainian election.
Listen, and oddly enough, just as accurate as anything that transpired on cable news over the past 2 years. It's like I was reading this story, and at first I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. And then I thought about what the rest of us do for a living, and I was like, oh, this isn't that ridiculous. It's actually pretty solid.
Well, we basically just call old people and say, hey, old person, who are you more frightened of? Like that's basically what our polling is, and it didn't work the last couple of times.
Who you're more frightened of?
Yeah, we just go to a nursing home and put pictures out there and see how that works. It's basically the same thing.
Listen, I'm telling you, this story was designed to make cable news pundits feel insecure. We don't have to worry about automation so much. They're not going to have computer pundits. But the bear pundit is a legitimate threat. It's something we should not take lightly.
I would 1,000% watch any program on Fox or MSNBC or CNN if one of the co-hosts was a permanent bear. If it was just Anderson Cooper, but there was always a bear on set in some capacity, and they had to have a camera on the bear at all times, and they had to let it roar if it wanted.
No, you watched it all day. If Don Lemon had a bear co-host, like I would watch just for the IQ boost alone. I would watch. And then to boost the intellect of the show.
There'd always be that moment where like maybe the bear will get loose. Like there'd be a part of you that would kind of be rooting for that. Just in general, just for the shakeup. I
had a guy in my cab when I was younger who was going up to Vancouver to wrestle a bear.
Yeah.
And this was the first I had heard of such a thing. But there are places where you can go and pay money to wrestle a muzzled, in some instances, declawed bear, which won't sit well with a lot of people, but that was a thing. And it fascinated me to the point that I started looking up other places that might have one of these bears. And the town my wife grew up in, Wapakoneta, Ohio, was one town over from Freiburg, who had the world-famous Freiburg bear. And in Freiburg, Ohio, there was a gas station where you could go out, fill it up, and wrestle a bear. And if that's the kind of family fun we need more of in this country.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, first, that makes total sense that it'd be at a gas station, because there's a logical connection there between bear wrestling and petroleum. So like that I get that. And then what happened if the bear won? Because that's my problem with a lot of animal sports is I feel like I grew up in Oklahoma. I've been to my fair share of rodeos. I feel like if you get bucked off by the bull won, period. Team bull, score 1 point. Like in order for you to win against a bull, you should ride the bull until it finally just crouches down, rolls over, and lets you rub its tummy. Then you've won. Then Team Human won.
But until that day, yeah, we do need more fairness in the bull scoring. I'm with you there. But yes, the bear wrestling match. Well, the thing was, I mean, if the bear won because it was muzzled, I mean, you wrestled the bear, you lost. But there was probably a time, when we were a little more barbaric, where like you really took the loss a lot harder. You dig?
Right, where they didn't muzzle the bear, they just gave you a lot of whiskey and just assumed that was more or less the right thing.
Yeah, long story short, there was no post-game interview for the loser, if you know what I mean. Getting roughed up a little.
Do you know what noodling is? Are you familiar with that?
Noodling?
Yeah. It's not what you think it is. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's not what you think it is. Noodling is a sport that is in southern Oklahoma. I assume it's in other parts of the country, but it's probably the dumbest thing you can do in a lake. You go into a lake, and most of the lakes in Oklahoma are really just swollen rivers. So you're going into this very fat, flat river. You find a hole and you shove your hand into it, and you hope something bites your hand, and then you try and pick it up with your hand. So you basically a catfish will come up, and you shove your hand as far as you can into the catfish, and then try and catch it with your forearm. And that's like every year. That's a whole thing.
And depending on what kind of fish you bring up predicts the outcome of the election.
Exactly. That is how we pick our governor. We're like, it's a carp. Okay, Team Democrats, you won this time. All right, better next time. Republicans and the bass.
That's funny. Yeah. It's a good analogy to bring up a bottom feeder.
Yeah, perfect. That was 100% intentional. So sticking on water, I'm going to kick it over to France. There's apparently been this mystery going. I did not know about this. I'm kind of surprised, given how much Coast to Coast AM I've listened to, that I hadn't heard about this mystery. But for 30 years, Garfield phones, like the fat cat on comic strips, Garfield phones have been washing onto a beach in somewhere. I forget. I think Vilantansu. I don't know. Vilantansu sounds Japanese. I can't be pronouncing that correctly. Vilantansu. They've been washing onto this beach in Vilantansu, and they don't know where it's coming from. And they think maybe they finally figured it out, where these guys started looking around the cove, and they found at least a bunch of them in a cove, and they're thinking maybe that there was a box of Garphone phones that got lost in the 70s that's just been birthing them semi-regularly for the last 20 years. Either way, I think ultimately Jim Davis, who's the cartoonist behind Garfield, is responsible, and I think he should be extradited to France to personally apologize for the people that have been terrorized in that community.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how many lasagna jokes they had to tell every year when Garfield showed up again, or did you do this, Odie, or one of those things. I believe Dave was the owner. It's a funny story, though, that even back then there was an appetite to ship Garfield products overseas, because it never struck me growing up that any of our pop culture was exporting to the extent that it was. And at the school I grew up near, I wasn't in high school yet, but the high school I grew up next door to, we had a high school Spanish teacher there that was friendly with the kids, and he used to give us a Mickey Mouse comic, and it was called Mickey Rat, because that's what Mickey Mouse was called I guess in Spanish. It might have been raton, I could be wrong, but the actual verbiage on the comic was Mickey Rat, and it was just the version of the comic that they were consuming over in Spain. And it was fascinating just to know that it was like out there in the world. And when I heard this Garfield story, it took me back to Mickey Rat. And now that I think about it, I think Senor Capo, who's a delightful man, I think he was getting over on us with child labor, because he was giving us these free comics, but he'd be like, yeah, while you're here, can you move this desk? Can you help take this stuff down? It's like looking back on it now, I must have lifted like 55 freaking desks, and I couldn't even read the comics and know Spanish.
So he paid you by letting you look at a Spanish rat. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that I couldn't even read. What's the statute of limitations? I got to bring this guy to justice.
I think I don't think you should prosecute him. I think what you should do is figure out how much you would have been paid, and then figure out the interest, and then track him down and demand that. That might be possible.
It's gonna happen.
Have you ever heard of a thing called Garfield minus Garfield, or Garfield without Garfield?
It's my favorite thing in the world.
If you guys are listening to this at home and you don't know what I'm talking about, but you know who Garfield is, look it up. Garfield without Garfield. This brilliant man has gone in and he just takes Garfield out of everyone. So it'll be
Dave and Odie.
Yeah, it'll be Dave staring into nothing. Next panel, I don't understand women. Next panel, staring into nothing. It's just this incredibly sad man talking to himself. It's
funny,
disturbing, but really funny. I actually think it's a lot funnier than Garfield.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything about Dave's existence either.
Yeah.
Because someone said to me, the first kid who showed it to me, my friend Bob Palumbo, was like, "Yeah, I'm like, this is so crazy. It makes Dave look so nuts." I'm like, let's not forget that Dave was talking to a cat and a dog for 30 years before we did this to him.
Yeah,
There's exactly a coherent thing happening there.
That's a great point. So back to competitive sports. Competitors in Thailand lit up cigars for Cigar Smoking World Championship. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does that entail? Is it the amount of cigars someone can smoke? No. Apparently, the Cigar Smoking World Championship is how long you can smoke a cigar with one match without letting the cigar go out. And the record this year was 1 hour and 47 seconds, which is pretty good. And apparently, it's second place because... I'm sorry. It's second to the going record. The world record is 3 hours and 40 minutes, which I don't know how that works. I assumed that was that sounds odd to me that someone could do it. That or that person is truly a genius when it comes to cigars. I would like to see how many. I want to go the other route. I would like to see how many cigars a person can suck down in an hour. That's what I want to know.
It's actually a good one, because the keeping the cigar lit thing. It is a skill. It might sound easy to somebody, like, oh, you just keep puffing on the cigar, but it doesn't actually work that way, because like certain angles cause the flame to go differently and stuff like that. And in my experience, because I will smoke cigar on a Sunday, like obviously this had to have happened indoors, or the wind would have blew it out, I would think, right?
Makes sense.
But to your point of everybody smoking like 1,000 cigars and just black lunging themselves, like, I think that's really funny, and it reminds me of, like, the insanity of smoking to begin with. Do you remember when cigarette brands were giving out points, like Marlboro Miles or Joe Camel Bucks?
No.
And they were giving out, they used to give out points, like almost like UPC symbols. And if you earned enough, say, Marlboro Miles, you could cash them in, and you'd get, like, an inflatable raft to go kayaking in. Perfect. The only problem was, if you had smoked 10,000 points worth of Marlboros, you couldn't blow up the raft. You're sitting there for about 3.5 weeks trying to catch your breath between puffs to blow up the frickin' raft. It was a thing. That was a thing. Joe Camel also out there. So when you're done reading Garfield minus Garfield, check out Joe Camel.
Does he have his own comic strip?
No, but he had his marketing thing. I believe they were called Joe Camel Bucks.
Nice.
I believe.
This is what I have I have one cigar a year or so, and this is what happens every time. I will go about a year. A friend will invite me, usually to a cabin or something, and they'll go, hey, you want to have a cigar? And I'll go, yeah, you know what? I haven't had a cigar in a year. And then I'll smoke half of it, nearly vomit, and remember that I don't like cigars, but I like that I look cool before I get nauseous. So basically, I just like props, is I guess what I'm getting at. Is I enjoy the prop element of it. I don't like the actual tactile or oral sensations of a cigar.
No, you look like the kind of guy that would smoke a pipe.
I do. I agree. And like, if the second they come up with a cure for cancer, I am 100% doubling down on, I think probably briarwood pipes. I'm not quite a meerschaum guy. We've got a cabin in Wagner, in Oklahoma, the Kinney Bunkport of Oklahoma, and I'll smoke a pipe a couple times when I'm up there a year, but I don't keep them in Dallas because I don't want to develop that as a habit. I like the smell. I feel like if I'm chomping down on a pipe, I feel like if I had a British accent and a pipe, I could convince anyone of anything. I just put that pipe in and go, the world is actually quite flat. And people go, he makes a good point.
I am so fascinated by how well that accent travels, because in the overall scheme of things, people obviously do take them more seriously with that accent. But to the European Union, like England is like the Florida of the European Union. That's what they have all the strange interest stories. Woman marries her car, something stupid like that. That's straight Florida.
You're 100% right. I think it's because we've got this. I think it's just that Hollywood's lazy. That is my synopsis for this whole phenomenon. Is whenever you need to have a smart person in a Hollywood film or a sophisticated person, they're like, make them British. That's how that works. Or whenever there's any period piece ever in any other country that involves a duke, the duke is always British. If it's set in France, he's British. If it's set in Germany, he's British, right? So we've grown up being brainwashed into thinking that all British people are lords. But yeah, the amount of when I was traveling, when I was living in Scotland, and I'd go over and travel in Germany and France and places like that, their interpretation was basically the drunkards coming over for a 3-day weekend to break tables at the local cafe. That was how they looked at the English. Like people in rugby jerseys is how they see the English.
Absolutely. No, that is who they are. They're the spring breakers of the European Union. They show up and trash the place.
Yep.
It's pretty entertaining. But yes, that's why you come to the show. You get this type
You're getting
of
that international worldview. You're getting all sorts of information there. But we'll cut it back.
We're cultured.
We're cultured, yeah. We're gonna come back to Michigan a little bit. Michigan Library book returned after nearly 51 years. Somebody showed up with a copy of The Life of Charles Dickens that had been checked out May 16th, 1968. My only thought is if it takes you 51 years to finish a book, just give up and admit you're illiterate. I think if you can't do it in that amount of time, you're never going to do it. Just be done with it and double down on Spotify.
I don't know. Maybe he just really liked it, man. Maybe he just
he'd be driving back to the library and be like, I'm not ready yet. I want to read it one more time.
Give it up, man. He can't. It's like Dickens was alive when he took that. My gosh.
I reversed my opinion. You're right. Now my opinion is The Life of Charles Dickens is probably the greatest book ever written. If that guy just couldn't bother to bring it back.
Nothing can compete with it. I mean, do you think it was one of those deals where obviously they forget taking it out or they can't find it, then they do, and they're like, yeah, I'll bring it back, whatever. But I sometimes wonder, because I'm such an internet cynic now, like I just wonder if people are just working long con for the hits. Like this.
Go ahead, sorry.
Like this is that like you'll read these stories where it'll be like, homeless man feels bad for stranded couple, so he gives them $20. And then everybody starts a GoFundMe for the homeless man that pulls in like $1.2 million. And then you find out 3 days later he knew the couple. There was no, you know what I mean?
Yeah. He's actually like running a skateboard shop in Portland. He's fine.
Yeah. The internet has ruined me. And I immediately heard the story and I was like, oh yeah, that book was probably he took it out like a week ago. He probably took it out, destroyed the card, and then showed up to the library. But then I couldn't. This is what happened. It's the one institution I still have respect for is the library. I still stand by the library.
Okay.
And I couldn't put the blood on their hands here. I couldn't see them being complicit in something like this for hits.
Right.
So I'm going to say it's a legit story and that The Life of Charles Dickens is just the best book ever written.
I like that. I see where you're going, because there could be an incredibly canny, like if that library has a 22-year-old social media studies major that just came in and is running their social media, and he or she is, like soaking it in a bathtub so it turns like it looks weird, warping it and doing all of that stuff to get around to the point where they can claim it. I can kind of see that, but I'm with you. I don't want to throw the library under the bus. Maybe we can be cynics without inculcating the library. Maybe the guy that rented it sold it to another library or rented it to another library, got the money from it, then stole it back here last week and returned it. That way he was able to basically double time him.
Oh, my gosh. That was a lot. But it was, listen, if we're going to start hatching library plots, man.
Like the most awful, boring, tedious, slow Ocean's 11 movie ever devised.
It's called Ocean's Chapter 11.
Ocean's Chapter 11.
Because no one's going to our production.
All right, final story of the day. We're going to go over to, I guess, Israel, because that's where Uri Geller is living. Uri Geller urges mass telepathy against Brexit. So Uri Geller, if you're not familiar with him, he kind of, I guess he came into the fore maybe the 70s or the 80s. He was the guy that would go on all the talk shows and bend spoons with his mind. And then I think got run out of town a couple of times, wound up hawking jewelry, and now he lives in Israel, in I think Tel Aviv. But he's a British citizen, and so he's trying to organize a mass telepathic intervention to convince Theresa May to do another Brexit vote and pull out of Brexit. And my thought is, if it works, we must immediately kill this very powerful wizard. Like if he pulls it off, we should 100% put him in Guantanamo.
Yeah, but the fact that we have a wizard being taken seriously over there brings me back to our other discussion about their accents not lending themselves to legitimate intelligence. Listen.
Oh, the English, you mean? Okay, right. Okay,
yeah. Back to that whole thing.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed Brexit. Can I just say that? I watched their hearings, and they do make me feel like we're more civilized than we get credit for. Because they're having like a straight food fight over there when they get together in Parliament and start yelling at each other.
Yeah.
And it almost makes sense that a wizard would come through with a spell because they have like this end of days vibe going on. Like there's a good Monty Python movie, The Life of Brian, where they go into Jerusalem and everyone there is pretending that they're the Messiah. It was just like a thing people did. They were like Times Square street performers where they all dress as like Transformers and naked cowboys and stuff. And every time I watch Parliament, I get that vibe. It has this end of days thing going on. So it almost makes sense that you could bring in a wizard or a faith healer who would try to fix this. But I'm with you on killing the guy just because I've had a stressful week and heck, kill everybody.
I think you're right about the us getting a lack of credit. This isn't my quote. I don't remember who said it, but the British Parliament is like American Senate with funny accents and a 2-drink minimum. It is far more caustic than we are. Like if you ever want to get like really good political slap fighting in, watch the Prime Minister's questions, which we should 100% do in America. I would love to do the Prime Minister's questions in America, but basically they drag the Prime Minister in front of Parliament for an hour to be heckled. That's like we have
just be yelled at.
Yeah, we have checks and balances. They have heckling built into their political system, and a lot of the time they give as good as they get, but it's very entertaining.
It's great. I mean, think about it. Comparatively speaking, our debate, looks like the Harvard debate team, looks structured. Theirs looks like bum fights. that YouTube series is just actual homeless people beating each other up on sidewalks, which don't knock it. It's how I met my wife. But here we are. I had one cheap shot at Jimmy Failla.
On that note,
it's a one for interview. But yeah, what a nice time. I should probably get to couples counseling.
I wanted to get a good left hook on your wife. But Jimmy, it's nice to have you on the program again. Thank you for making time out of your Friday to come talk to us about all manners of subjects all over the world.
We learned a lot here, and I appreciate it, man. Don't forget, I've really done a lot of traveling. Like the most foreign place I've gone is Epcot. So this is a nice treat for me to get out there and culture with you. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. Little bit of listener feedback to wrap up the week before you head home to be a responsible adult on Friday. On iTunes, Pickle Pete 74 says, funny and easygoing, he is laid back and actually talks about the world without anger or getting others angry. Very good. Thank you, Pickle Pete. I'll tell you what, it's a nice review. Thank you for saying that about me. I appreciate that. But also, you're the first person I've ever met who's described me as laid back. I get anally retentive way more. And uptight, one time in college, I think I was a freshman, and some sorority girls drove by, and they like rolled the window down, and they were talking to me and the other two guys I was with, and they're like, hey, what are you guys studying? And I was like, well, I'm studying history, and I'm thinking I'm also going to, and then and she just went, you need to be less uptight, and drove away. Apparently it made an impact on me, but you're undoing a lot of that psychological damage that I got from a freshman year of being the kind of guy that wears elbow patches. Before I leave, we have a YouTube page. And if you want to see this episode and check out what I'm wearing, which right now is velvet because we're still in velvet weather despite what you think, you can go on YouTube and look for Something's Off with Andrew Heaton and subscribe to it. I'm trying to get 100 subscribers on there because then I get my own, I think, YouTube button. And then the next step is, I guess, a game show. I'm not really sure, but you can check it out and feel even more bonded to me than you already do. And remember, you can tweet me at Mighty Heaton or Facebook me at facebook.com/Mighty Heaton, or even email me by subscribing to my newsletter at mightyheaton.com and replying when or if I send it out on Fridays. Right now it's 50-50, but eventually there will be another to spruce up your day. I'd also like to encourage you to subscribe to Blaze TV and download the Blaze TV app. If you do, you can watch me instead of just listening to me. Use the promo code Heaton to get $10 off your annual Blaze TV subscription. I look like I carry an avocado dip in one pocket and gluten-free chips in the other pocket. That's a cheap shot, Jennings. That's a gluten-free chips. Anyway, we'll talk about that. So download the Blaze TV app on iTunes or Google Play, get subscribed to The Blaze, and then fall in love with me more than you already are. You can also watch portions of the show on Facebook Watch by going to facebook.com/HeatonTV, but why not check out the whole shebang on YouTube? Finally, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I rated your podcast. I wrote a 5-star review for it, and it was 4.5 paragraphs long. It had a thesis. It had the 3 paragraphs about it. I incorporated Chaucer into it at one point. It was a really elegant review that I wrote of your podcast, and I'd appreciate it if you said a nice thing about mine, like Pickle Pete did. That helps other people discover this here political orphanage. Thank you, and good day.